All right, everybody. Thank you for joining me here again today at the Everlasting Truth broadcast, where, as you know, you guessed it, you've heard it before, it's always our aim, our pleasure, and our goal to give you everlasting truth for this ever changing world. We are still taking a bit of a break, and I don't know how long this will go on for, just as the Lord leads and directs, but we're taking a little bit of a break still from our series we've been in, looking at the words of Christ. That's where we've been at for quite a while now. We got some 70 broadcasts in there, and just kind of seems like let's just take a break from that for just a moment. Once again, I don't know how long that'll last, but we're taking a little bit of a break from that series and just kind of giving you some different things along as we go. And today I want to share with you something that's different for me, something new to me. Not necessarily a revolutionary new understanding, but just something new that God recently spoke to me about. As a matter of fact, just today in my morning devotional time, the Lord kind of unfolded this for me, and it's going to be from James chapter 1. So if you got a Bible, go ahead and go there. But while you're doing that and getting your mind, your heart right, and kind of in that zone, but while you're doing that, let me just remind you how important it is to have that personal devotional time with God every single day. Every single day. It's necessary that we hear from Him. Jesus said, "My sheep know my voice, and they hear me, and they follow me." Jesus said, I believe it was 3 times in John 10, that His sheep know His voice. And we need to be able to hear Him. And we've got to shut off everything else going on outside. We've got to do like Mary did. Martha was cumbered about with much serving, but Mary, she sat at the feet of Jesus and heard His word. And God told Martha that Mary hath chosen that good part, and it shall not be taken away from her. And Jesus emphasized the importance of pulling away from everything else and just sitting with Him, just sitting at the feet of Jesus, not necessarily a deep study, not necessarily a academic pursuit, not a theological pursuit, but just some time to sit at the feet of the Son of God. Just hear God's voice, speak to Him, talk to Him, pray, read His Word. Let His Word just sit in your soul and think on it, stir on it, ponder it, talk to the Lord about it. You need that time. And as I was trying to do that this morning, the Lord just showed me something here that I think will be helpful to you. But as I said, it's from James chapter number 1. Now, James is there's not a bad book in the Bible. Don't get me wrong. All scripture is given by inspiration of God, profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, instruction, and righteousness. So I wouldn't dare say that any book is any less, but what I will say is that James is a great book. And James is a very practical book. James is a book basically on practical Christianity. If you want to know what Christianity looks like as it is lived out, the book of James highlights those things. It's very simple, applicable truths that James is calling people to action to. James is very much so just that. It is a book of a call to action. It's the same book where we find him making the statement in James 2 about faith without what? Works is dead. And so it's a call to action. But James calls us to something here in the first chapter. Now, the first chapter of James is all about temptation. It's about suffering. It's about trials, all those type things. And I would argue that there's two sorts of temptation found in the first chapter of James. And there's two different ways that we use the word temptation. Temptation at the beginning of the chapter deals with, trials and suffering and hardships that come about in our life. The second half, where he talks about temptation, is more so a temptation to sin. And so we want to make sure we use those terms correctly, because we cannot apply them both ways at all times, because James says later in the chapter, he says, "Let no man say when he's tempted, I am tempted of God. For God cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempteth he any man." So if it's a temptation to sin, that does not come from God. However, there are some other temptations in our life that we go through that are put there to help us in our walk with God. And that's what I want to talk about very quickly. Really, the fact that life is seasonal. It goes through ups, it goes through downs, it goes through highs and lows, it goes through rejoicings, and it goes through sufferings and hardships. It's all over the place. And, if you look at the Old Testament, you look at the nation of Israel, which are in a sense, they're a picture of what you and I go through as God's people as well. And you look at them, and they're constantly up and down. I mean, just look at the 6 books of the Kings: 1st, 2nd Samuel, 1st, 2nd Kings, 1st, 2nd Chronicles, all that. You see over and over good king, bad king, good king, bad king. The nation goes up, the nation goes down. You read throughout Exodus, or not so much Exodus, but Numbers, Deuteronomy, you see how they go up, they go down, up, down. The book of Judges, they're up, they're down. Really, the entire history of the nation of Israel is seasonal. Seasonal of righteousness and seasons of down. And this is the believer's life. And I'll say that I've said this several times, actually, and just said it here recently. I believe it was last week talking to somebody, but churches are seasonal. Churches go through ups, they go through downs. Right now, thank God, we're at a place of growth in many churches, and our church is growing, and I'm grateful. I'm beyond grateful for that. So thankful that God's allowed us to see that. But I also understand this, it's seasonal. It comes and it goes. There will be a time where the growth slows down, probably, and we'll be faithful with what we have, and then the season will pick back up, and it'll go back down, and that's just the nature of life. God wired the nature of the earth itself that way. It's seasonal. Everything doesn't always stay the same. There's times of death when we go off into winter, everything dies, and there's times of life where everything thrives again. But it is the deaths that cause the lives to look so nice. It is the winters that cause the summers to look so nice, and the winters are necessary. The lows are necessary. The losses are necessary. And James deals with that reality of loss. That's why he says in James 1 and verse number 2, he said, "My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into diverse temptations, knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience. But let patience have her perfect work, that you may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing." James infers the idea that, hey, listen, you're going to go through diverse trials. Things are going to happen. But James also makes the case that these are necessary. He says, count it all joy when you fall into diverse temptations, knowing this, that the trying of your faith, it does something, it produces something. It worketh patience. And so our trials are not in vain, our seasons are not in vain, our sufferings are not in vain, but they are, in God's words, working something inside of you and I. They are producing, they are building, they are making us more patient. You see, God pushes us to our end so that our limits expand. He says that our trials work patience. And that word patience, it speaks of endurance. It means endurance. And I want you to think about an endurance runner. How do you build endurance? Well, you push yourself to the limit every day. So let's say that they start off running and they run for 2 minutes and they're tired. That's their limit. That's the very beginning stage. Well, guess what? If they run for 2 minutes today and they keep doing that, then by next week, they won't get tired until they run for 4 minutes. And then a week after that, they won't be tired until they run 6 minutes. And their limit keeps expanding because they keep pushing the limit. As the more you push the limit, the more endurance you build. And so sometimes God pushes the limit in our life so that our limits expand. Our boundaries go beyond. We can endure more with the more that we endure. Does that make sense? The more that we endure allows us to endure even more. So God allows us to go through these things, but here's what I want to leave with you here for just a few moments. There's a couple things about this stuff, and number one, and I've already kind of made this case, but it is in fact seasonal. He's talking about these trials and these sufferings and these ups and these downs, right? And they're seasonal. I'm reminded that Peter said in 1 Peter 1:6, Peter makes this case about the hardship that his audience was facing in that chapter. 1 Peter chapter 1 and verse number 6, Peter says this, "Wherein ye greatly rejoice, though now for a season, if need be, ye are in heaviness through manifold temptations." Peter said the heaviness that the audience he was writing to was having, and the manifold temptations they were suffering, just like the temptations James is talking about, Peter said they were seasonal. And the word seasonal that Peter uses in the Greek is an interesting word. It literally means puny, like insufficient, weak, small. And so Peter's talking about their suffering. And he says that the season of their suffering, the time of their suffering, the bounds of their suffering is but a puny one. It's limited. It's small. It's seasonal. And seasons come and go. Winter doesn't last forever. Fall don't last forever. Spring don't last forever. Summer don't last forever. Seasons by definition come and go. And Peter said that your suffering, it's just that. It's seasonal. It does not last forever. Child of God, please let me remind you, to the person who's out there suffering this morning and you're going through hardship and you're going through pain and you're going through strife, let me just remind you of this. It doesn't last. It doesn't last. It ends somewhere. God knows your limit. He knows the bounds. He knows what you can take. The psalmist said in Psalm 103, he said, "As a father hath compassion upon his children, so the Lord pitieth them that fear him. For he knoweth our frame. He remembereth that we are but dust." He knows your frame. He knows your makeup. He knows your composition. He knows how weak you are. He knows what you can take and what you can't take. And you say, well, this is about all that I can take. Well, that's the way you build endurance. The more you get pushed to your max, the further your max extends. And next time, this won't be so hard. And you do that all throughout your Christian life to where your limits get pushed and your limits get pushed and your limits get pushed. So that by the time you go see Jesus, you have expanded in your Christian life and you can handle and you can endure and you can hang with the best of them because God has developed you through the suffering. You know, it's like working out. It's like training your body that the more you push it, the more your body can push. You know, in exercising and weightlifting, if you do not work yourself to failure, if you do not work yourself to the point where you can literally push no more, your muscles do not grow. It is a rule of muscle growth that you push yourself to failure. Ask anybody in bodybuilding or training. And that's what God does with us. If He don't push us to failure, if He don't push us to the breaking point, if He don't push us to the very end, we don't grow. And so sometimes God allows us to be at the end of ourselves. I would say one of the most mature, well-grown Christians would be the Apostle Paul. And yet the Apostle Paul, is it not coincidental? He was mature. And do you know why? It's not coincidental that he spent the majority of his Christian life at his wit's end. He said he was pressed down. He said that they were oppressed on every side. Paul went through things where he was constantly beat down, both physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally. He was beat down spiritually in 2 Corinthians 12. He was beat down physically in 2 Corinthians 11. He was beat down emotionally in 2 Corinthians. All throughout, Paul was beat down, and yet he was the strongest man. Do you know why he was the strongest man? Because he was constantly pushed to his limit. And God just wants to strengthen you. Jesus said, strengthen those things which remain. He wants you to be stronger. He wants to build you. And so I will say this, that suffering, friend, it's seasonal. But not only is suffering seasonal, look right here. James lets us in on another little note that I picked up this morning that I believe the Lord dropped for me. Suffering isn't just seasonal. Suffering it's a cycle. It's a cycle. You're up and you're down, and the cycle just keeps running. Notice what he says right here. He's talking about suffering, right? And he makes the case in verse number 9, let the brother of low degree rejoice in that he is exalted. He says, but the rich in that he is made low, because as the flower of the grass he shall pass away. For the sun is no sooner risen with a burning heat, but it withereth the grass, the flower thereof falleth, and the grace of the fashion of it perisheth. So also shall the rich man fade away in his ways. Blessed is the man that endureth temptation. So both before and after this verse right here, James 1, verse 9 and verse 10 and 11, is the idea of temptation, suffering, trials. And Jesus makes the case. Not Jesus, forgive me. Well, it is the Word of God, so I guess you could say that. But I meant to say James as the human author, Jesus, his Spirit, as the spiritual author. But James says in verse number 9 that it's cyclical. It's a cycle. He says, let the brother of low degree rejoice in that he is what? Exalted. And then he talks about, verse 10, the rich man who is made low. There's an inversion here. The low brother is exalted. He goes higher. And the high brother, he goes low. And so they swap roles. So the one who was once the rich brother is now the low brother. And then what does verse number 9 say God does with the low brother? He exalts him. And then what does God do with the exalted brother? He lowers him. And so we see this idea that we just keep flipping around in this cycle. If we're low today, he exalts us. And when he exalts us for a while, then he lowers us so he can humble us. Isn't that why he said he lowers the rich man? He says, because as the flower of the grass, he shall pass away. God humbles him. You know, if we were rich and we always had everything we wanted and all was well, we would forget how finite we were. We would think that we have everything figured out. That's human nature. We see it with Israel. As soon as they started doing well, they forgot God because they thought they had everything. They had it all figured out. And so what does God do? He knocks them down and he humbles them. And so God takes the rich man and he knocks him down a couple notches, humbles him, reminds him that he's human, reminds him that he's dependent. And then God takes the low man, who in this cycle once was the rich man who got knocked down. So now he's low, and then God exalts him, and he's back up on top again. It's a cycle, over and over and over again. And is not that the story of the Christian life? That we're not always the one on the mountain, and we're not always the one on in the valley, are we? We're up and we're down. We're up and we're down. I'm on the mountain some days, some weeks, some months, some years. I'm in the valley some days, some weeks, some months, some years. I'm never one or the other all the time. It's a cycle. And so let not those that are low think wrongly of those that are high. Because guess what? The cycle's going to flip here before long, and you're going to go one way and they're going to go the other way. And then let not those that are high think wrongly of those that are low. Let us remember that each of us are in this seasonal, cyclical life in which we go up, we go down, we go in and we go out. But what's James' point in this? His point is whether we're up or whether we're down, whether we're the high brother that's exalted or we're the low brother, no matter which one we are, he says, my brethren, count it all joy. Count it all joy when you fall into diverse temptations. It doesn't matter which one we are, we're to rejoice. I mean, obviously, we can rejoice when there are no temptations. That idea is just kind of posited there as an inference. Everybody rejoices when everything's good. He says, but even those that are low, let them rejoice as well. So you say, well, today I'm on the bottom. Well, James says, under the inspiration of the Holy Ghost, rejoice. You say, I'm up top. The Bible says rejoice. Paul said, rejoice evermore. So we need to have this idea that no matter where we're at, top, bottom, we can rejoice. Why? Because it's not going to last forever. It's going to flip. Child of God, if you're on top, yes, I know that means that at some point the bottom's going to drop out and you're going to go down some. You're going to lower. It's like a Ferris wheel. You go up, but as sure as you go up, as long as the ride don't stop, it goes back down. And as long as you're living, if you're up, just wait. The Ferris wheel's coming around and it's going to go back to the bottom again. And then you'll go back up. But here's the thing about it. On a Ferris wheel, there's always a man that's in control. And he's pushing that button. And he's running that thing around. And he stops it where he wants to. And isn't that another part of the analogy? When you're riding that Ferris wheel, you don't ever know when it's going to stop. I've been on them and they'll stop halfway up. I've had them stop all the way at the top. I've had them stop 3/4 of the way down. You just don't ever know where that thing's going to stop. But what I do know, there's a man at the bottom who's mashing buttons and telling it when to go and when to stop. And just because I'm up there and I'm not in control and I don't know when it's going to stop and I don't know when I'm going to be on the bottom and I don't know when I'm going to be on the top, doesn't mean that somebody isn't in control and they don't know. And friend, we got a God that's running the Ferris wheel of our life. Sometimes he hits the stop button when we're at the bottom. Sometimes he lets us ride on up towards the top and he hits the stop button and stops us up there where we hang out on top for a while. But if we're at the top, we're coming down. And if we're at the bottom, we're going up. And it's going to do that until we get off this Ferris wheel called life. In the meanwhile, let us all just trust, no matter what position, high or low, that there's a man at the control panel and he knows what he's doing. That there's a God who has the cycles and seasons of our life figured out. And let us rejoice therein. My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into diverse temptations. knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience. But let patience have her perfect work, that ye may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. God bless you. Been good to be with you today. We'll see you next week.